Good afternoon and welcome everyone to this AGM and annual members meeting. My name is Dean Fathers and I'm privileged to be the Chair of Nottinghamshire Healthcare. And first of all, I'd like to welcome you all to Highbury. I'd like to officially start by thanking Highbury for allowing us to come onto the site and to use this venue, because I know, as this is a working site, how disruptive it can be in terms of car parking facilities, and getting people to look after us for the day is really quite challenging sometimes. So thank you to everybody at Highbury for facilitating that. Today is an opportunity to review what happened in the last financial year, and also to explain to you what our year-end position actually was. We'll also review some of the highlights in what has been yet another busy year, and for many an exciting year, although not without its challenges, as I'm sure you'll appreciate. Our ambition is to provide the highest standard of patient and service user care and experience, and this remains core to our aims and our objectives. This year's AGM-AMM is actually, though, a bitter-sweet occasion for me. Sweet in many regards because we've got John, our new Chief Executive, here today, and other members of the board who I'll introduce later, joining us for the very first time. But sad in that, having been here now for nearly 9 years, I'm not permitted to carry on beyond the end of December, and therefore this is actually my last AGM and chair of the council. And I've worked in this trust for many years. I've had fun fulfilling those responsibilities. I've enjoyed working with you as people who care passionately for what we do. I've had lots of laughter, and on occasions, far too many occasions, as well as sharing laughter with you, I've actually shed a tear or two with you, because this is actually a very emotional job to actually do. And as a result of that, I'm going to take away some very clear, vivid, but mixed memories from the Trust. And I'd like to, before I go, just thank everybody, not only in this room, but I'll make sure that I go around the Trust and see as many people as I possibly can to say thank you to them personally, because they've made it such a great experience for me. So thank you, one and all, not just for coming today, but for everything that you've done to support us. Now to business. Our first item is to approve the minutes of the last annual general meeting, stroke annual members meeting. So you've had that circulated. Can I have a proposer for Jenny? You're proposing them as an accurate record, and a seconder. And are we happy to support that proposal? So those minutes have been passed. So I've been proud to have been the chair of a membership-based organisation, the membership being represented through the Trust's Council of Governors. The Trust Constitution details arrangements, including those of membership, the Board of Directors, and also that Council of Governors. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce, therefore, the Board of Directors, who I'd like to stand at this moment in time, the board, if you would be so kind. So these are the board to whom we are talking. And also, if you sit, our governors, if you could stand. So we have a few governors here, more than a few governors here. Fantastic. And thank you very much. And therefore, those are the people who are looking after the steerage of this organisation to make sure that our course is appropriate. The Council has two prime responsibilities. The first, to represent the interests of the membership, but also of the wider public, hence the reason why this is a membership meeting as well as an annual general meeting. And the second one is to hold the Board of Directors, and specifically the non-executive directors, to account for making sure that we spend our scarce resource in the best possible way. The Constitution defines the Council's composition of elected public and staff representatives, and we also have appointed stakeholder representatives as well. The Trust Board has had an interesting year. Our Chief Executive, Ruth Hawkins, retiring in September, and we would like to record our vote of thanks to Ruth for her great service to this organisation. And then handing over temporarily to Dr. Julie Atfield, who took up an interim position until John joined us in January of this year. We would like, therefore, to thank Julie. She's not here actually today, is she? She's on holiday. So we'd like to thank Julie for taking on that role officially, and it would be nice to have that recorded in the minutes too. We've said goodbye to Peter Parsons, an esteemed non-executive who, like me, managed to move to the end of his time with us in a way which I think was, in his case, exemplary and an outstanding servant of this organisation. He performed the role not only of a non-executive, but also of a senior independent director, which provided additional responsibilities, and he performed those extremely well. I'd like to welcome then specifically two new non-executives. So they've stood up once already, but I'll ask them to stand up again. Trevor Ormond, who's the new non-executive, who is chair of our Finance and Performance Committee, and Carolyn, who is also chair of our Mental Health Act Legislation Committee. I always have difficulty with the length of that committee, but two important roles in the Trust, and hopefully they've settled into their roles well. I know Trevor has, because he's had his appraisal post-induction this morning, and Carolyn is about to have hers shortly. So it's really good to see them adding value and contributing to the future success of this organisation. Further details around the Constitution, Board of Directors and Council of Governors changes can actually be found in the information packs provided to you on the table. So if you do get the chance to take those away and read them at your leisure, then I would commend them to you. I will now ask our lead governor, Jenny Britton, to come up and share with us her membership strategy report. Jenny, over to you.
This has been a busy year for the governors, welcoming John Brewin as CEO in January, and there have been a number of governors coming to the end of their terms, and we have a total of eight new governors commencing their terms this year. The monthly meetings have been well attended, and we started in September with an overview of complaints by Michelle Bateman, Associate Director of Nursing, followed by a presentation from Andy Sears, IAP Service Manager, who told us of the effectiveness of their work. In November, Kelly Sheldon and Julie Walker, General Managers from General Health in Mid-Notts and Bassetlaw, and Newark and Sherwood, respectively, described the services they managed, which ranged from physio to hospice and include continuing healthcare and district nursing and other things. In December, Angie Jackson and Catherine Pope, Service Managers and Sophie Parkin General Manager, explained the work of the specialist services where physical and mental health were combined. This service covers a range of small services with different commissioning arrangements and includes CAMS, IAPT, gender identity services, and other things as well. The February presentations were from Lisa Dinsdale, Service Director, and Sarah Jane Ashmore and Elaine Town, General Managers from Adult General Health within Greater Notts. And this was followed by Anna Simpson, General Manager from Offender Health, who work with prisons to improve health, physical health, and support justice. The remit there, it covers physical healthcare and substance misuse. In March, John Burton, General Manager for Mental Health Services for Older People, and Emma Hutton's Operations Manager, told us about their services. At the May meeting, Rick Fuller, General Manager, and Lisa Sutton, Matron, told us of their work at Waswood Medium Secure Unit for Men. This was followed by Paul Sanguinazzi and Lucy Mills from Involvement, Experience and Volunteering, explaining how the data they collect and the work they do can inform our role. Sarah Collis, Chairman of Health Watch, joined us for this session, and we hope to work more closely with Health Watch, as their aims are very similar to ours, to effectively use information gathered from communities and respond to the feedback. Our last monthly meeting featured the Children's and Young People's Directorate, led by Peter Hunt, General Manager. This is a public health service open to children in Knots under 19. This was followed by Kumar, General Manager from Arnold Lodge, a medium secure unit for both sexes, who talked about the work they did there. He was accompanied by 2 patients who told us very movingly of their experiences at Arnold Lodge and their hopes for the future. 2 of our meetings were preceded by talks by Dean Fathers, our chair, on leadership and strategy. These were interesting and instructive, and we thank him for his time. Additionally, there have been 4 Council of Governors meetings this year, where the formal business of the Council has been undertaken. Signing off of questions posed by governors has taken place along with broader discussions with the CEO and board members. The staff survey and the CQC report have been the main focus of these meetings, and we have learnt of the proposals to address some of the issues arising from these reports. Governors have accompanied non-executive directors on visits and observed committee and board meetings. This, combined with regular meetings, has provoked a lot of discussion, often around workforce issues, and has enabled us to ask questions to gain assurance about the Trust's performance. And I'd like to thank all the staff and non-executive directors who have made this possible. We carried out our annual review before Christmas, and in the main, governors are comfortable in their role, the information available and the support offered. However, after recent discussions, including the new governors, we will be altering the way we work a little to make us more effective. A number of governors have attended outside events run by NHS providers, and these have proved useful, not just the presentations and information offered, but meeting other governors and learning how other councils work. Governors attended the opening of Hopewood, the new CAMS unit, and also the opening of the new adult beds at Calverton Hill, a partnership with the Priory Group. The Council of Governors has also fulfilled its statutory duties this year. Ali Breeden, a partner from the Trust's external auditors, PwC, had earlier in the year explained the background to the audit plan for 2018 and 19 and some of the difficulties trusts in general faced, and we chose an indicator for them to examine. At the July Council meeting, PwC presented their annual audit letter and quality report, where we were assured by them that there were no issues with the process or evidence regarding the local indicator we'd chosen. Sharon Krieber had presented the business plan to the Council for consideration for 2018-19 in June last year. Governors also contributed to the process of appointing new auditors. The Nomination and Remuneration Committee has been busy appointing 2 new non-executive directors, Trevor Oram and Carolyn White. Recent recommendations from that committee have been for a cost of living pay rise for non-executive directors, and this was approved at the July meeting. And we will soon be interviewing for another non-executive director and a future chair. As a council, we'll continue to challenge the work of the Trust, with particular focus on staffing and recruitment following the disappointing staff survey and CQC report. We should, however, remember that we've also learned about some excellent work within the Trust. The future is unlikely to be easy, and some of the problems are not confined to this Trust, but nationwide. But we will continue to monitor the Trust performance. And finally, as you've just learnt, Dean Fathers is stepping down as chair of the Trust at the end of the year, and on behalf of the Council and me personally, I'd like to thank him for his tireless service to the Trust and the Council of Governors over the last 9 years. He embraced the concept of a Council of Governors from its days as a shadow member's council and supported its transition to a council with statutory responsibilities. His knowledge of the NHS and the Trust has been invaluable, and we wish him every success in future roles.
Hello everyone, I'm Andy Smith, I'm the Deputy Director of Finance of the Trust, and I'm going to go through today our annual report and accounts for the 2018-19 financial year. The report is actually nearly 300 pages, and thankfully we will only be doing a short number of slides to briefly give you the highlights. So firstly, some brief context on how our finances take shape each year. All NHS providers have to set a financial plan every year that takes into account their expected income and expenditure, alongside how they set out their efficiency savings to cope with the impact of inflation and any increases or decreases in demand on their services that they provide to patients. Our regulator, NHSI, set out a financial target as well to trusts, and ideally all NHS provider financial plans meet or exceed that target. The aim of this process is for those providers that do agree and deliver against their target, they actually receive a set bonus. This bonus is called Sustainability Transformation Funding, or as I now will shorten that to STF. Just after the year finishes, and once all providers' initial results are known, a further allocation of STF is made before our accounts can then be finalised. As the slide shows, for 2018-19, our plan and NHSI control total had an initial target of 3.6 million, but if we were able to deliver that, would lead to additional STF funding of 3.8 million, giving a total of 7.4 million. So in terms of how we fared for 2018-19 against that 7.4 million target, we reported an initial surplus of 7.1 million, so just shy of that 7.4 target. We were then allocated an additional STF funding of 3.1 million from the centre, giving an overall total of 10.3 million that was reported in our accounts. And as Jenny alluded to earlier, our auditors gave us an unqualified opinion on those accounts. Briefly touch on some detail now on our income and expenditure. So our total income of 467 million, 85% of this income comes via our commissioners through NHS England. Of this amount, 37% relates to our forensic services pathway, 46% comes from our local CCGs, including Bassett Law, that covers our general and mental health services, with a further 6% from our local authorities, primarily relating to children's services. From that income, the Trust's total spend was 457 million. The largest chunk of that, of course, is our staff, 72%, 335 million, for which we had 8,500 whole-time equivalents at our year end. A further 2% was also required to supply us agency staff. Now, 2% is at a lower end nationally for NHS providers, and we were also below the agency cap that is set by our regulator on this. The other major elements of spend are the operational costs of our estate at 5%, purchase of healthcare services, which includes specialist healthcare alongside out-of-area bed spend, is a further 4%, and there's a further 8% mostly relating to travel and communication costs reported up there as other. It is important to note that we do not receive a separate capital allocation of cash to spend on our buildings each year. So being able to deliver our financial target is very important, as it generates cash the Trust is then able to use to invest and maintain our estate over the short to medium term. In terms of our cash position, we ended the year with 45 million, and during the year we spent nearly 15 million on capital projects. The bulk of this money went towards backlog maintenance schemes that keeps the Trust estate fit for purpose, focusing on those areas of need and importance. £4 million was also needed for IT infrastructure and equipment that safeguarded operationally crucial systems and sensitive patient records. The remainder of our capital spend went on completion of Hopewood. That's the main details of the finances for the year. Our trust regulators manage how well we manage our money with a use of resources rating, and this has 5 individual measures from 1 to 4, with 1 being the best and 4 being the lowest. These are shown on the slide and range from how much cash we have to pay our bills, the delivery of our financial plan, and if we stay within our agency cap. As the slide shows, at the year end, our score was achieved of 1. This financial use of resources score forms part of how the trust is regulated as part of the single oversight framework. Our key finance information is reported to our board and regulator monthly alongside our operational performance. I will finish with some information around our operational performance. The trust is subject to some mandated measures on this as shown on the slide. So for mental health data quality, psychosis and 3 separate IAP targets, these have all been met for the 2018-19 year. The areas that we were not able to meet were around a local NHSI trajectory target for patients placed out of area and crisis resolution gatekeeping. These remain a key focus for the board with plans in place to meet those targets for the coming year. Our regulator takes our finance score along with our use of resources score with inputs such as CQC, etc. to determine how they segment us alongside the single operating framework, and we ended our year with an overall score of 2. So that covers off the main points on the finance and operational performance. I'll now hand over to John.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm John Bruin. I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted to be your Chief Executive and to be accountable for all the things that we do together. But before we start, just to be clear, for the first half of 2018-19, it was nothing to do with me. And for the second half of 2018-19, that was all the result of the first half of the year and was nothing to do with me either. Joking aside. I thought, I just, for those of you who don't know me, I'll give you a very brief thumbnail sketch of a bit of my background and then talk through, as well as reviewing some of the things we've done in the year, look ahead, look to the future. It's really important that despite the fact that we are in challenging times, that we don't lose sight of why we're here for patients, their families and carers to do great things and provide really great services so that people can live well in their communities and enjoy fulfilling lives. So I'm, the clue's in the title, I'm a doctor, I'm a medical doctor and a psychiatrist. I continued practicing psychiatry until December of last year. And I've decided since coming to Nottingham that I can't continue to be a senior leader, chief executive and a medic and do both well. So hopefully I've not given up what I can do well and ended up doing what I don't. But you'll be the judges of that. Prior to coming here, I've been in Lincolnshire for 7 years and went over there as medical director for a couple of years and then chief executive for Lincolnshire Partnership for 5 years or so. I'm very proud about what we achieved in Lincoln. The CQC isn't the be-all and end-all of everything, but it's a very valid measure of how an organisation's doing. And Lincoln Partnership is currently rated good, and it's rated outstanding for well-led. And I'm very, very competitive. I've got a lot of friends in Lincoln who are currently being a bit sneery. I'm very clear that over the next few years we will catch and overtake them in that rating particularly. There's a lot to acknowledge over the last year in terms of what's happened in the broader NHS landscape. We are in the midst of very significant times of change and transition. So we're moving away from the long-term comfort of being a big provider organisation that focuses on our organisation doing the right thing. And we are starting to, quite rightly, think about system, what it's like to be part of a broader system. So working with other providers, acute providers, Nottingham University Hospitals, Sherwood Forest Hospitals, working with local authorities, working with commissioners, CCGs, working with primary care, working with a whole range of social care provision, third sector, voluntary organisations, housing organisations, are all really critical, as are many other stakeholders, in providing a full range of services for the people that need them. And we're a big cog, but we're not the only thing. And this is the centre of what the ICS, the Integrated Care System, and the ICPs, the more local partnerships, are all about. It's how we work together to provide more seamless services that people can access closer to home, get the treatments they need, get the care they need to help them live in their communities. And this is a new programme for the whole of the NHS, and it's very early days, and it's taken a lot of time and resource and energy. And some of our traditional comforts about wearing our badge with our organisation will change, and we need to start to think about how we both contribute to that, but also step up and show some leadership. We are well thought of in the community, generally speaking, for being a good trust, having great services. But we're at that point of needing to adapt and change and move forward. One of the details within what's called the long-term plan, so the NHS has now got a 10-year long-term plan. The good news bit is that within the priorities of that, mental health services are writ large. It's a national priority, and that's obviously one of the fundamental parts of our role. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, so it's good to be a national priority. Some funding is protected. There will be additional funding that we will need to be agile and sharp and focused on applying for, because it won't come from traditional routes. But at the same time, as a national priority, you're under the spotlight more. So there will be more regulation, there will be more targets. And we have to, again, manage the challenge of that. Within the long-term plan, mental health, but within that, children and young people, it's a national crisis. You read about it on a regular basis, don't you, of the challenges that our young people have at school, at home, in their communities. And the dramatic rise in presentations to A&E, in crisis, for all sorts of anxiety and self-harm related problems. But again, we've got great services in Nottinghamshire and beyond. And it's critical that we think about, okay, this is where we are, where are we going for the future? How do we wrap all the other services that are within the county to enable this not to be our organisational thing on its own, and how do we get these spread across other providers? A couple of particular challenges I just wanted to outline that have been crucial through this year. One is you'll be familiar with something called out-of-area beds and out-of-area placements. So this is the situation where people that require an admission to a hospital bed in adult services have to go out of county. So at the time that they're most unwell, most in need of social networks, they could be admitted to Manchester, to Newcastle, to London. It's clearly not right. It's not a great experience. Outcomes are poor, and it costs a significant amount of additional money that the trust has to find within its income. And there's a national policy now that this needs to be eradicated by 2021. And our trust is one of the national outliers in performance around out-of-area admissions. So it's a massive challenge for us, not only to do the right thing for patients, but also to address the financial challenge that it puts put our way. We've got a number of particular projects to address it. Some have been referred to already and are in train. But again, we're under national spotlight to make sure that we do what we need to do. So far, it's starting to move in the right direction. It's relatively early days, but I'm confident we can do it and get it back where it needs to be. And it would be remiss of me not to mention within the challenges the significant challenge that the CQC inspection has given us. So I won't go into the detail, happy to take questions, but the overall rating for the trust has reduced from good to requires improvement, which is disappointing in itself. But you have to see that in the context that that goes against the grain. A number of trusts, mental health community trusts nationally, are moving to good and beyond. So we're going against the flow, which again puts us under the spotlight of regulators. Why are we in this position? So there's lots to do there in terms of how we respond. And it's critically important we do the right thing. It's really important that we don't have a knee-jerk to having an action plan and making things go from red to green overnight, because that wouldn't be the right thing to do. So you will have seen, hopefully, or started to see some of the fundamental things that we're starting to work on, which is around the culture and the values and the behaviours of the organisation, which starts with the board, but needs to be co-produced with everybody, with our fantastic staff. And this goes back to asking some of the basic questions around what's our purpose, why are we here? I know why I'm here, why I've been in health services for 30 plus years. It's to provide great services for patients. And my bag is particularly mental health, but it's not solely that now. And it's really important that we get those services right. So the work around the culture and the values is to re-engage with staff to what's important to you, what's important to us. This is a collective endeavour to do this together. We're compassionate, we're kind. We want an organisation where staff feel able to say, hang on a minute, that's not right. Where staff feel able to say, what about this is a good idea. Where we feel comfortable saying, oh, I got that wrong. Didn't quite work out, I learned from it, we move forward. And they're some of the basic ingredients that I think have been a bit hidden or a bit missing. It's there in patches, but it needs to be across the piece, and we need to feel confident at being able to say and do those things. So although CQC sets us some difficult challenges, I'm really optimistic. We've got, nearly 9,000 staff? Fantastic staff. We've got a couple of Queen's nurses here, Di and Janine, hopefully going through the thing as it rolls by. Get that picture up. And that, that's one of the most heartening things as I've arrived, come back. Wherever I go, staff are totally focused and up for the challenge. Their commitment, their passion, their desire to do great things for people has blown me away, really. And my optimism is renewed. Despite some of the scores on the doors, I'm really confident that this organisation for the next years is going to move forward at pace. And we're starting to get ourselves aligned to make sure that we can do what we need to do for our people. So that's probably sufficient from me, but before I finish, I would just like to add my own personal thanks to Dean. As I was thinking about what to say about Dean, because you know him far better than I, although we do go back quite a long way. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be your chief executive. I'm 7 months in and enjoying it hugely. I did think, so what's Dean's legacy? So it got the trust to foundation trust status. We've got a fantastic relationship with some really key academic institutions at the universities. We've got Hopewood, Children and Young People's Unit, Mother and Baby Unit. And then I was thinking, it's a shame that the Mother and Baby Unit has already got Margaret Oates' name, because it could be the Father's Mother and Baby Unit. Just the stupid way my brain works, sorry. Made me laugh. But joking aside, nearly 9 years, fantastic commitment to the organisation. And it's been great working with you, albeit somewhat curtailed. And I wish you all the best for the future as well. I'm sure we'll keep in touch for the future. So thanks, Dean. Thanks to you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for listening. I'm going to leave it there. I can't remember what's next on the agenda. Is it Q&A?
So thank you for that, and thank you, Jenny and Andy, for your presentations too. This is the time when we move over to questions and answers, and I've actually got some Blue Peter question and answers prepared for me previously. So whilst you're thinking about what you want to ask, I'm going to read these out, and Sharon, I'm afraid, I think it was you that's been nominated to answer two of them. So I'll ask you to answer two of them. I'll answer the third, and then I'll move it out to the wider audience. If you do have a question, if you would like to stand up, say who you are, what your question is, and then I'll hand it to whichever of the executives is the most appropriate, or the non-executives, just to warn them, whichever is the most appropriate to answer the question. So I'm going to have to put my glasses on. Question one, how will the Trust ensure that the targets on air quality outlined in the NHS plan are met, especially considering how tight these deadlines are? How do you support the uptake and wider adaptation of electric vehicles? Are you considering expanding the EV workplace charging infrastructure further to support your staff with shifting from petrol/diesel cars to greener, full electric ones?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sharon Creeber, Deputy Director of Business Development, and I'm here for Angela Potter, the Deputy. So I think the first thing to say is the Trust recognises actually how challenging the targets are, but the Trust continues to be committed to the whole sustainability agenda and is continuing to make good progress. And indeed, the board approved Sustainable Development Management Plan last June and receives regular reports on progress. Pleased to report that there has been an increase in the use of charging points, particularly since additional chargers were installed at Hopewood and Duncan Macmillan House. Additional units have also been commissioned at Highbury and Arnold Lodge, and chargers at Wathwood are in the process of being commissioned. And we're also seeking additional grant funding for a charger at Millbrook. So I think there's some good news there. We're also working with our company who provide our fleet cars, and they're also committed to this agenda. And more broadly undertaking a review of travel and transport, which these issues will be at the heart of that. Linked to this was around also supporting staff to reduce our business mileage, recognising how huge that is, but also recognising the challenge that a lot of our staff are supporting people in communities in primary care and in their own home. We know that just acting on the fleet management and having the charges doesn't necessarily meet all the targets. We know there's a lot more to do. It is very challenging. But just finally for this question, I think it is relevant to acknowledge the commitment to this agenda that only recently over 50 teams across the Trust have signed up to the Green Impact Programme to continue our journey with becoming more sustainable.
Fantastic.
I'll wait
Thank
here
you.
for the second one.
You wait here for the second one. I'm just going to respond to your challenge about legacy. And I think there are three things which I'm really proud of that I would like to kind of cite as legacy, really, that is not just because of me, but in some ways because of what we as a board have done. And one of them is around the green agenda. And I don't know if people know this, but Notts Healthcare actually got mentioned at the United Nations dispatch box in New York for the way that we have positively impacted on the carbon footprint of the NHS, and the fact that we were a leading trust in the UK on sustainability. So that's one of them. And I think it's only appropriate. Where's Catherine sitting? Catherine. Two of the great things that I think I'm really most proud of, especially as this is the 50th anniversary of Stonewall, is the inclusivity, equality and diversity agenda that we've been really passionate about working on, and achieving the Stonewall Best Company in 15 and the Stonewall High Performing Organisation, only one of 9 ever at that time, was absolutely fantastic achievements. And then getting a gold award for those of us who are reservists or veterans from His Majesty Prince William. I think that was another great personal achievement for me to take away, and one I will remember for a very long time, much to the detriment of my wife, whose photo was taken off of my personal phone to have his put next to me on it. So she's really upset at the fact that she got downgraded by a duke. But over to you for the second question then, if I may. So the second question is, the NHS long-term plan calls for a reduction in the amount of single-use plastics used by the NHS. How is the Trust planning on reducing single-use plastics, both from a clinical and non-clinical setting? And Peter could actually give a personal campaign message on this one, because I know that's something he's passionate about as well. Oh. Over to you, Shannon.
Thank you. So I've just mentioned the Trust's Sustainable Development Management Plan, and actually one of the key targets within that is about reducing single-use plastics. The objective of reducing single-use plastics was first to identify which areas had the greatest use in the Trust, because you can imagine a Trust our size with the consumables, the things we use. What we wanted to do is see which areas of the Trust to target first, and secondly, to work with our suppliers to see how this could be reduced. Through this, the Trust identified that the largest proportion of single-use plastic actually comes from the national NHS supply chain, which the Trust has to use, and they're the national provider of medical consumable products in the NHS. So what we've done is we've raised at all different levels, as senior levels as we can, nationally and locally, with the supply chain, to encourage them and ask them how they're aiming to reduce single-use plastic, and this is part of an ongoing discussion with them. What we also do is that when we tender out for services, we've recently included now an environmental questionnaire, so that people providing services to us explain to us how they're committed to this agenda too. And I think those of us in the organisation can see lots of examples day to day, be that the knives and forks that are now available to use in cafe art or whatever, and presumably on the wards. So, but I do think we do have to acknowledge that as a single organisation, though we can have some impact, it's through influencing the wider agenda and large providers of the consumables to us where we're going to have most impact. But I think we need to acknowledge that this is a challenging area, and we're doing what we can.
Thank you, Sharon.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and the third question is actually one that I've just referred to as well, which is a question that is very dear to me. For relationship issues, again, I mentioned my dear wife earlier. It's something that she particularly is keen to make sure that I take forward, because she suffers from deafness herself. But the question is, the ICS, for those people who don't know what the ICS, it stands for the Integrated Care System, and it's the body that John was referring to, which is providing an oversight of how Nottingham and Nottinghamshire are integrating the way that we provide services so as to make our services more effective, more capable of adding value for the money that we're collectively spending together. And how has the ICS has made a commitment to inclusivity how are you, as in us, making sure that the deaf community is involved in the development of the ICP. Now, the ICP is actually a tier of the new health system, which is population locality based, so that there are 3 ICPs within the ICS. It sounds like old money converting to new money. So the ICS covers the whole of Nottingham and Nottinghamshire. The ICPs cover what we call mid-Nottinghamshire, cover the city of Nottingham, and then South Nottinghamshire. So there are 3 of them. And we're contributing in a couple of ways, in that John has successfully been appointed as the convener, I think that's the official word, of the Southern ICP, and we'll make sure that that is taken forward in a way which is taking this agenda forward. But we're going to make sure we take that forward by being strategic at an ICS level. So the strategy will actually be defined at the ICS level, and they're actively engaging at this moment with communities to ensure that what we plan to do not only fits in with the long-term plan for the NHS, but also complies with what we need locally. And we're making sure by challenging at the ICS meetings the executives, because John and I are on that board, we're challenging the way that those executives go through that process. And Alex Ball, who is the head of communications for the ICS, is making sure that he's doing inclusivity, considering inclusivity in everything that he does, including for people from the deaf community, because it's really important that we understand their specific communication needs, but also their specific health and care needs as well. So we will make sure that we push on the same techniques as we've learnt to do here through your valuable contribution and challenge to us, so that we communicate in the most appropriate ways. We make sure that signers are provided where appropriate, and that easy translation is done, so that we can actually ensure that people understand our intent and we understand their intent fully. So on that, I would like to personally thank, for holding our feet to the fire, those people from the deaf community who've come here regularly, who I've got to know very well over the last 9 years, and I hope again a wonderful legacy to take forward. But that's not my legacy, that's down to you, and a huge contribution and vote of thanks to you for everything that you've done in that regards. Thank you. So, questions. Did that answer the question okay?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. So, any questions from the floor?
If you talk to members of the public or hear the media, the biggest concern about mental health services is the sheer wait that people encounter before receiving treatment. And I know, interestingly, I was at the hustings recently over at the Gateway Hotel. I think there's a point that was actually raised by a very good member of your personnel to both of the candidates about what they would do, particularly about improving access for children and young people who, of course, have particularly acute needs often. I'm conscious that you're stepping down, but in 2 or 3 years' time, how different do you think the position will be in terms of how long people are having to wait for access to services?
So I'll answer that personally, and then John will pick that up because he's going to take that forward. But one of the things that I'm really pleased at in my time here as chair is I actually got onto the board of the Mental Health Network nationally, which is part of the NHS Confederation. And it's a cross-system organisation, membership organisation. And we lobbied really hard for parity of esteem. And the Mental Health Network, I don't know if they invented that phrase, but certainly they made it something that became very familiar to me as a result. And we set the objective of getting parity of esteem onto the agenda And we measured our success by could we get it onto the agenda of a political party. We thought it was going to be that difficult. After 5 years of being in that role, we were delighted that at the 2015 election, it was on every political manifesto for all parties, and it became therefore something which was being talked about for the first time. And part of the parity of esteem means treating crises, physical and mental health, the same, treating all mental health the same as though they were physical health needs. And as a result of that, we've lobbied hard to get the funding to enable what we've known as a Cinderella service for many years to actually get up to those right levels. So the momentum is being generating and growing, and we now have, as part of the national strategy, some real system control support for what we're planning to do, and now it's down to us to actually get it right. So, John, on that point, I'll hand over to you.
I was at an early intervention in psychosis away day in the week, and we were talking about service transformation and where we are now and where we'd like to be. And I gave the example of my 3 children are all over 20 now, and they have no concept of weight. So they're also glued to a phone, tablet. And we can all order something today, can't we? And it can be delivered to our house by tomorrow. And broadly speaking, the NHS and social care system is a million miles away from that at the moment, for all sorts of reasons. But we have a sort of mindset, don't we, that any pathway we design, there's an inbuilt wait. So even for cancer urgent referrals, there's 2 weeks before you even start to think about 6 weeks for this and 18 weeks for that and hidden waits for this. And I just think as part of the way that the world is changing, the concept of waiting for healthcare will be forgotten at some point. And we need to make sure that we're agile enough to make that adaptation. As we stand, it's not possible next week to say no one's going to wait anymore. But we really need to start to think about how we work together with people to redesign pathways that starts to reduce and eradicate it. Because you can become numb as a provider that on the other side of the fence that 6 weeks wait for an IAP psychological service isn't very long and we meet the target. But if you're on the receiving end of that and you've got, crippling anxiety that's preventing you going to work or looking after your children or whatever, 6 weeks is an interminable time. So with the EIP, the Early Intervention Psychosis teams, have sort of started to challenge them to think about, in their service redesign, how do we have a much more appropriate mechanism to allow the right people to access services as quickly as possible. It's a big job because we're not awash with cash and resource to do that, but it's not beyond the realms of what a 21st century health service should be providing.
Did that answer your question? Thank you. Any other questions?
The question is based on the green impact strategy referred to some of the initiatives a bit earlier, but what I'm proposing is would it be worthwhile for the trust to be investing in actually ground source heat pumps as an alternative to gas-fired or oil-fired central heating systems? Would it be sort of viable?
Hi, David Pipes, Capital Services Manager for the Trust, so working estates and facilities, here representing Cable Car today. So, without getting too technical into the elaborate things, when we look at a building project for any capital development, we go through quite a rigorous process. So, let's take Hopewood, for example, where we have spent a significant amount of capital money for the last 2 or 3 years. At the initial design, we do look at all eventual capabilities of providing our services, whether that be electric, gas, combined heat and power, ground heat source pumps. Where we have the availability and the capital to be able to do that, and with the regulatory building regulations from the local authorities, we make our decisions accordingly. So the recent development of Hopewood, for example, has gone with a combined heat and power system, which is a green system for both electricity and heating. So we do make those considerations as we go along, depending on whichever project is applicable to us. Okay.
Thank you, Dave.
Well, thank you.
I think an interesting thing came out on the radio. I don't know if I heard it properly, but I think one of the new government policies will be to get us off gas within a certain time period, and ground source heat pumps were the ones that were being suggested as the means by which we will do that. And so I think there's probably going to be a very big agenda in that regards that the board will be picking up more in the future. So it's a good question. Thank you. Any other questions?
So I represent the Deaf Wellbeing Action Group meeting, and we have regular meetings at the Macalisa Duncan Macmillan House, and we have done for several years. And so we're based in the Recovery College at Duncan Mac. I'm not sure, there's a couple of ladies that attend the meeting. I'm not sure of their names, but they actually wanted to set up a special course for deaf people to attend, a series of sessions for mental health, and that was cut due to funding. And I know that the deaf people involved in the course were extremely disappointed. Recently in the deaf community, there's been several deaf men that have actually committed suicide, and it's a hot topic in the community at the moment. And there are lots of people raising funds because there are cuts to the services, and so the deaf community have taken it upon themselves to raise the money. But I think that so far in the UK, in the last maybe 9-12 months, there are 12 deaf people that have killed themselves. And so this is an area now, so we have this course set up to enable deaf people to live more independently, to lead better lives, and then it was cut, and so it's another disappointment that we're facing as a community.
I don't know if we've got anyone here that could answer it directly, but it's obviously a really, and it's the first I've heard of it, it's a really important issue that you've raised. I'm gonna need to go back and find some information, and if it's okay to come back and have a conversation with you. It sounds like something that we probably decided without being in knowledge of the full facts, because those figures in terms of national numbers of deaths through suicide is quite alarming. So if we can get back to you on that.
Catherine, you wanted to come in there?
Can I add a little bit? That's
Yeah.
okay. Sorry, Catherine Contra, Associate Director of Report and Diversity. I am aware that the course was cancelled. It was a course it was commissioned by the Primary Care Trust at the time, and it was due to lack of funding. So what we as an organisation have tried to do is to bolster it up in terms of our Let's Talk Wellbeing service, to make sure that the deaf community can access an interpreter or a deaf professional who is a CBT therapist or some sort of therapist. But the value of the Recovery College courses are really vital to the deaf community, and it would be worth exploring that further.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Okay, another question?
Yeah, this is a question. It was based on the question. It was a question that was put to the House of Commons yesterday at the Prime Minister's question time. Where a MP, I can't remember who it was, but he asked the Prime Minister about complementary therapies and active medicines, and it was some reference to the Secretary of State, the new Secretary of State, looking into the actual matter, because there was some reference to holistic alternatives like that. I'd be interested to know what way forward will the NHS and the trusts be taking along the lines of complementary medicines and active therapy because there's some medications, particularly antipsychotics, are quite bad side effects, and maybe there might be some kind of complement in addition because they seem they seem to act like a chemical straitjacket, not a true a true true cure. Sort of.
So, Julie, pass the microphone over to you.
I think the crucial thing is going to be about how we make sure that people's care is individual, because what works for one person won't work for another. And so we really encourage staff to think through all of those options with somebody, including that more holistic complementary. It's difficult because we can't prescribe some of it in the same way, and we have national rules around it, but we certainly don't stop people from looking at it, and we'll help people to find things and access it if it works for them. And I know a lot of awards and others work a lot with aromatherapy and other things like that. So we're keen to support it, but don't have an active sort of drive into it, if that makes sense.
Thank you again. Appreciate that. Any other questions? No more questions? In which case, thank you all for coming. Thank you very much for sharing with us the last year. I won't be here with you for the next year, but I hope that you have a great, successful year together, and I commend the board to go and build upon what we've done and achieve that good to outstanding that I know the Trust is actually capable of being. So thank you very much. Safe journey home.